It was a hot sunny day in Town City, and the gang were listening to their favourite explorer show on the radio, when suddenly a man at the radio station announced a mummy was rampaging around the Caddy Kingdom in Egypt. They then heard a familiar voice on the radio. It was King Hairball, the King of Egypt. He was a cat. He really was a cat. King Hairball wore a purple cape with a purple crown, with jade stones on it. He was a yellow cat with orange triangle stripes. Well, he explained, a horrible mummy has been roaming around the Caddy Kingdom. When I was wandering around like usual, I spotted a piece of yellowy brown paper. I picked it up and read it carefully. It was a description of the mummy. It read, "The mummy wore yellowy brown bandages with a red ruby in the centre," he explained. "Thank you, King Hairball. Now it's time for a piece by Beethoven." Skallow then switched the radio off with his bony hand and said, "Hey Joe, let's go to Egypt." "Let's go," Joe replied with a lot of enthusiasm. "What about Robo?" added Major Nick. "Well, hey, couldn't he stay with you guys?" asked Skallow. "Well, okay," mumbled the bodyguard. "Well, that's sorted," Skallow declared. "I think we should go," said Major Nick. "Bye," said the three friends. "Bye," echoed Skallow and Joe. Skallow and Joe were best friends. Skallow moved to Town City from Skeleton Town and now lives next door to Joe with Robo, the robotic dog. "Let's go!" Joe screeched. "Skeleton brains, what a shout!" Skallow shouted at the top of his lungs. "Come," Skallow called. Joe rushed over as Skallow opened a big rectangular drawer. The two boys peered inside and saw 2 explorer outfits, 2 backpacks crammed with supplies, 2 wide-brim hats, and 2 whips. "That's great, Skallow," Joe declared. "Thanks," Skallow said proudly. The 2 boys zoomed out the front door, raced into the car, and set off. When they arrived at the airport, Skallow went to see the ticket woman. Joe was impatient to get going and walked over to see the bill, and the number was $100,000. Joe turned as pale as a sheep and fell over backwards. Skallow then turned to see Joe lying on the ground. Later Joe woke up and Skallow said to him hurriedly, "Don't worry, we'll miss the plane." Skallow and Joe rushed for the plane and made it just in time. The plane roared down the runway and took off into the sky. A few hours later they arrived in Egypt. The plane landed and everyone got off. Skallow and Joe were stuck in the back and had to wait till last. "This is ridiculous," Joe whispered. "It's all right," Skallow replied. Eventually the 2 boys were able to leave the plane. As they were making their way down the aisle, an enormous man jumped in their way. Skallow and Joe were both surprised and asked who he was. He replied, "I'm Simon Fatty." As this idiot was blabbering to himself, Skallow and Joe hurried to the end of the plane. "That guy is crazy," Joe declared. "Yeah," Skallow said with a giggle. "How are we going to get to the Caddy Kingdom?" Joe asked. "Don't worry, Joey Carter. I've got that sorted," Skallow answered proudly. "What?" Joe thought as Skallow pulled him along a dirt track. Soon they arrived at a camel yard. "Okay, 2 please," Skallow said, holding up 2 fingers. "Why sure, my friend," the owner replied. "Oh, camels." The stable doors opened and 2 camels trotted out. "Okay, we'll take them," Skallow declared. "Excellent," the owner replied. Skallow paid the money and they were off. After a few hours they arrived at the Caddy Kingdom. "Wow and double wow," Joe exclaimed. "Yeah, it's pretty amazing," Skallow replied. They parked up the camels, got off and searched for a door. Joe discovered a metal one. "That's a bit strange, I would have expected a wooden one." They looked around a bit and then saw some hieroglyphics on the left-hand side of the wall. Beside the hieroglyphics was a keypad, which confused them even more. Then they noticed that some of the hieroglyphics were different colours, so they tried entering them into the keypad, and it worked. The door opened and they were presented with a long dark hallway. and Joe did not like the look of this at all. They were walking slowly down the tunnel when suddenly they heard thundering footsteps coming towards them. They were so scared they just ran through any door they could find. Luckily, it was a dark, small, empty room. The thundering footsteps had stopped, and Skallow and Joe decided it was time for bed. They got out their sleeping bags and went to sleep. The next morning they woke up to find all their supplies gone. Who could have done this? Joe said, looking confused. Oh well, at least they left us the lantern, Skallow reassured him. Skallow picked up the lantern and they set off back down the hallway. A little while later, Joe put his hand on the wall and fell in. It was a secret door, and they saw King Hairball sitting proudly on his throne. The throne was made of gold. On either end of its arms were jade stones. The pointy bits on the top were diamond, and in the middle was a cat head with ruby eyes. King Hairball questioned them on their business here, with Skallow and Joe explaining that they were here to help with the mummy's situation. The king thought for a moment before deciding to allow them to continue. He then got out of his throne and brought them to a door. Behind the door was an old, run-down railway. Just then they heard wheels rolling towards them. "It's the mummy!" exclaimed Joe. "Quickly, into the cart!" They all climbed in and the cart took off. The cart went up and down until finally they came to a pit of poisonous snakes. Then the king got an idea. He declared, "Hold on to my cape." Skallow and Joe held on as tightly as they could as King Hairball leaped out of the cart. They floated down and landed safely on the ground. As for the mummy though, he fell in the snake pit. The mummy was now defeated, and out crawled Scorpio, Strangles, and the Wizard of Doom. "Now, it's time for you guys to go into the sarcophagus," Skallow scolded. "Ah, damn you, Skallow and Joe," growled the Wizard of Doom, as he and the others were thrown in. Later that day, Skallow and Joe said their goodbyes to King Hairball. They mounted their camels and trotted off to the airport. They got onto the plane, went back home, all to tell their friends about their mummy adventure.